I am the CEO of an award-winning visual effects company. That means we do CGI, computer-generated imagery, on some of the best film and television shows on your screens. I co-own my company with my business partner, Angela, and together we are the only 2 women in the world who own and run a company doing this. How did I get here? It was through trial and error. I grew up in a beautiful, quaint English village, and when I was 9, we emigrated to South Africa. We went by boat. We left Southampton on a very cold winter's day and set sail. 2.5 weeks later, we docked in Cape Town. We'd left the middle of winter, and we were now at 40-degree heat as we headed towards our final destination of Kimberley, a diamond mining town in the middle of nowhere. When we arrived, my brothers and I had been enrolled in our respective schools. Mine had unfortunately shut down. My parents had less than 4 days to find me a new position, and the only available place in this little mining town was the Afrikaans Comprehensive on the far side of town, where English was the second language. I survived. At 13, we moved to Johannesburg, and at 14, I had my first conversation with my father about my career. Dad, I think I want to be a pathologist. What a great idea, he said. In your next school holidays, I suggest you get hold of the local mortuary and you go and clean some dead bodies. Well, that immediately put that idea to bed. When I was 16 and I'd drawn the entire school brick for brick and in proportion, my parents again went back to the drawing board. Perhaps you should be an architect. So we looked into that. 6 to 7 years to qualify. That put that idea to bed. So I left school at 17 and a half with absolutely no idea what I was going to do. And my mother said, "You're going to learn to type." That had not been part of my career plan. All I envisaged was a typing pool. Touch typing, shorthand, and speed writing were part of the curriculum. I hated it. I spent the first 6 months in a coffee shop over the road. And about 6 or 7 months into my course, a film production company called the college looking for an assistant for their director. Right place, right time. I rushed into the head's office and I said, "Please send me to that interview. That's a job for me." And she said, "Actually, yes. However, you're going to represent the college and you're going to go in high heels and a skirt." I didn't own a pair of high heels. I went to that interview at a 90-degree angle, and I've never been able to walk in heels since. The minute I stepped foot on my first film set, I fell in love. It was a passion, and I couldn't believe that this was actually a career, and I was getting paid to do this. On my second film, I worked for the producers of the first film, and by my third film, I was a production secretary in the production office. Still pretty rusty typing skills. By the time I was 21, I'd worked on 9 films, and by this stage, I was a production coordinator. And I thought, I need to go back to England and I need to conquer the British film industry. So bought myself a 1-year open return ticket and headed back to London. The industry here was closed. You either needed to have an equity card or know someone who worked in the business, and I had neither of that to hand. There was no internet in 1991, so trying to find a job in the film industry was pretty difficult. I scoured every single paper, the Guardian media section, every recruitment agency that specialized in media. I applied for everything. I got predominantly rejected or pretty much no response whatsoever. In the meantime, I was temping to try and earn a bit of a living and getting thrown out of most of the jobs purely because my typing was still pretty shocking and I had an incredibly strong South African accent and it was the peak of apartheid. About 11 and a half months into my trip, and I had a couple of weeks left on my return ticket, I was heading home on a bus, and there was an advert in the Evening Standard, and it said, "Chairman of a film company looking for a PA." I duly applied, by fax, the next day. Never expected to hear from them, but they phoned me up, and they said, "Actually, come in for an interview in 2 days' time. We'd like to meet you." I thought nothing of it and went in. Sitting in the interview, waiting for the interview to start, a dog rushed through the door and jumped on my lap. I love animals, and this was a great start. In came the gentleman, the chairman, and he loved the fact that his dog loved me. The interview lasted all of about 3 minutes. The first thing he said to me is, "Where on earth is that accent from?" And when I explained I'd grown up in South Africa, he said, "I have a cousin who lives in Pretoria. You should come and work for me." I had no idea who he was, and it turns out that his name was Duncan Heath. He was the biggest talent agent outside Hollywood. He had the most exceptional client list. Directors, writers, producers, and actors. The acting list alone was Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, and even right across to Mick Jagger and David Bowie if they were going to appear on screen. I loved working for him, The downside was the amount of scripts I would have to read every month. Some months 20, some months 30 scripts, but not during work, in your own private time. So either in the evenings or at the weekends. One Friday, a script came in for a director client of ours, Mike Newell. I phoned him up. I said, Mike, the script's in. Can I bike it over? No, darling, he said. You read it. You tell me what you think, and if it's any good, I'll read it on Monday, or you can tell the client it's a no. So begrudgingly, on that Friday night, I took that script home, knowing I had to read it. So I sat down with a glass of red wine and opened up the script. The first 7 pages of dialogue, one word, fuck. I couldn't believe it. I laughed, I cried, and I laughed again. And I couldn't wait on Monday morning to get back and say, Mike, you have got to do this film. He did, and the script I read was 4 weddings and a funeral. I stayed at that agency for 18 months, and I really, really wanted to get back onto a film set. And through a director client, I got into the BBC through the back door. I joined BBC in the early 90s when it was an incredible training ground. You had films on one floor, series on another, serials, and an incredible mixture of talent working between these 3 floors. Great fun, and I stayed there for 3 years, but I still knew I wanted to get onto a British film set. I heard of a job that was crewing up, I applied, I got the job, and 3 days later I flew to Pakistan for 6 months. Over the next 8 years, I traveled the world and I slowly rose up the production chain. Now I was heading into being a production manager. Through all of this, my typing has never been great, but my organizational skills, exceptional. I'm on a film in Spain in the early 2000s, and this visual effects team arrive. And I'm like, who are you and what can I do for you? And they said, well, we need you to kind of bring the set alive. We need you to do an element shoot, which meant nothing to me. So effectively, on a day off, I had to get a whole lot of extras in costume and on set. I had to get horses and carts. I had to get fires lit and smoke coming through chimneys. No small feat with no notice. We got it done and they left, and I thought no more of it. And 4 months later, they called me up and they said, we've just joined this company called the Moving Picture Company, and they're looking for a head of new business, and you'd be perfect for the role. And I said, I'm not looking for a job. I'm in production and you're in post-production, and I really don't understand what this visual effects is all about. They said, look, just come in for the interview. So I went in for the interview to the fanciest offices in Soho, Sky Bar on the top floor, 3 cappuccino machines, and all these very cool people running around. And I'd come from pretty dodgy backwater film production offices around the world. I thought, I'm going to take this job. Maybe for 6 months, perhaps a year. These 120-hour filming weeks just getting on top of me. So I took the job thinking I wouldn't last very long. 6 months in, Harry Potter came to London. And the visual effects industry was tiny. There were less than 100 people in London. We all had to jump to it, and we all got some work on the first Harry Potter film. 20% of the visual effects were done in London. The rest all went back to Los Angeles. But we knew that, as J.K. Rowling had said, this is a British-made product. We had to raise our game and be able to take most of it on. By Harry Potter 3, the visual effects were doing predominantly over 50% of the visual effects, and they continued to grow. The visual effects industry has grown substantially in the last 20 years. I stayed at MPC for 7.5 years, and in that time, the film department that I joined of 12 was now running at 500, and the company was about to go global. I left, and a colleague of mine at the British Film Commission took me out for lunch, and he said, Lucy, you should consider opening your own company. And I thought, okay, I'll sleep on it. So I slept on it and woke up the next day, and I thought, I know exactly who I'm going to ask to do this with, and her name is Angela. And we asked one other to join us too. I met them in a coffee shop in Soho. They came in, they smiled, they said, what's this all about? And I said, let's the 3 of us form a visual effects company. And they said, all right, what does it take? And I went, no idea. And on the back of my Marlboro lights, I wrote down, we need to put some money down, we need to create a website, and we need to find some premises. That was the one and only business plan I did. We launched ourselves by website, and we announced ourselves to Hollywood and Soho. And then we waited for the phone to ring. And funnily enough, the phone rang in the second week. A friend of ours was working on a film called Prince of Persia for Disney. Come into our cutting rooms, Lucy. I think we might be able to help you out with a few shots. I raced over there, and there was the director, Mike Newell from 4 Weddings and a Funeral, who stood up and went, you started my career. Well, I didn't want to say to him, and I should say to him now, you started my company. We worked a little bit on that, and we got a little bit here and a little bit there. No salary whatsoever for the first 2 years. 6 months into our inception, I got a phone call from a very well-respected industry producer called Mark Huffam. I've got some execs coming to town, Lucy, and I want you to impress them. And I said, Bit difficult, there's 3 of us and a Labrador in an office. And he said, I don't care, get yourself through this one. And he put the phone down. Luckily, the meeting was 8 in the morning, so I didn't actually have to prove that I had no staff whatsoever. The meeting went incredibly well. A couple of phone calls later, we then 3 self-financed our own trip to Los Angeles. We landed the job. Season 1 of Game of Thrones. Who would have known we had just landed the biggest television show in the world, 3 of us and a Labrador. It was hard work. I was the visual effects producer, Angela was one of the supervisors, and around the creation of season 1, we built our company. We went on and got incredible accolade for the environments we created. The 600-foot ice wall, followed by the baby dragons, the first ever creatures created for HBO. We got Emmy nominated for that. We were less than 2 years old. In the meantime, we were so proud of the work that we'd done that we cut a breakdown reel of our work together, put it onto our company website and thought no more of it until one of my assistants ran into the office and went, Lucy, we have a problem. And I went, what? He said, it's been ripped off the website, it's now on YouTube. And over the next 48 hours, I watched in horror as this breakdown went viral and had over 1 million hits. I hadn't got any clearance from HBO. I waited and prayed, and they called me up and they said, Lucy, thank you. That is the most incredible publicity, but next time you get clearance. And I did get clearance for both the Dragons and the Ice Wall. The next show we took on was a 3-parter for the BBC, an adaptation of Great Expectations with Gillian Anderson and Ray Winstone. Tiny in size, tiny in budget. For us, massive. We won our first BAFTA. From there on, we kept on going, and over the next 10 years, we worked on some of the most incredible film and television in the world. One BAFTA Awards event, we got 2 nominations for the work that we did on War and Peace and The Night Manager. At the end of 2018, my business partner and I, Angela, won the Women in Film and Television Business Achievement Award, a huge accolade that gets given out to companies that have done well. We were sailing into 2021. We work on this incredible TV show called The Last Kingdom. We were really specializing in our CG armies. We were going full steam ahead. The armies were coming at us. We were really full for 2020, and the government announced lockdown. We had to go home and set 90 people up in less than a week. We still had shows being posted, and we could not stop that workflow. We managed to get it done, and we have, unfortunately, like every other company in London, had to reduce our overheads and scale back. But the future's bright, because filming has started again. And in that 6 months that we've all been sitting home, everyone stayed at home and watched loads of television, and content is depleted. We are full for 2021. I look back at my career and I think, gosh, 30 years ago, I couldn't even get into the industry without an equity card or knowing someone in the business. And 20 years ago, there were less than 100 people in visual effects, and now thousands in London. We're one of the leading places in the world. And 10 years ago, there was no such thing as Netflix and YouTube and Amazon Prime. And I just think the future is really exciting, and we are crying out for more people to join this area of the industry specifically. So going back over my career, when I was 14, and I wanted to be a pathologist, we now get to create as much blood and gore on screen as is legally allowed. And as for my career as an architect, I work on some of the finest shows and create some of the best environments in the world. Thank you.